Good evening, Daniel from Select Driving School here today. Tonight I want to present a slideshow that I've done, which was the best way of presenting this particular subject, which is really to talk about a number of risk factors that young drivers face, and using a scheme that's been running nationally for quite some time now called The Honest Truth, whereby they relate different risks to different animals to try and give you something to help you remember and think about risks you might be running, the possible consequences, and what you can do to avoid them. So hopefully you'll find the video useful. Although it's a pre-record, I am still here live whilst the video's running on Facebook, so if there are any questions or comments, please send them through and I will interrupt the showing of the video to answer them if appropriate. If you like the video, once it's up on YouTube, please click like, and if, as usual, if you want to contact me, please do so via my website or via my Facebook page. So first of all, let's get moving. So we have one of our old favourites here, mobile phones. So basically you want to make sure that you're not being distracted, you're not being a parrot on the phone. Okay, good drivers are not going to be making use of their phone whilst driving. You can see some statistics there giving you a good idea as to just how dangerous using a mobile phone can be. Even if it's hands-free, it can be very tempting to get so absorbed in the conversation that you're not really concentrating on what's going on the road. So you need to be able to maintain proper control of your car, make sure that you're aware of what's going on around you, making sure you're in a proper lane position and reacting properly to what's going on. You'll also find that people who tend to use their mobile phones potentially will try and enter gaps that are not safe because they're just multitasking and it makes people rush more. As I say, it's not just due to using the phone itself, it's also the distraction of the phone call as well. So keep your concentration on the road, not on the phone. What you can do to be a better driver. So you're in charge when you're in your vehicle. You're going to find this as a theme we're going to keep coming back to as I go through these. But if you're giving friends, etc., a lift, then it's your car, it's your rules. Don't be distracted by your own phone, and don't let others distract you. Don't let them to try and show you videos or muck around. If they need to do that, then tell them they can find somebody else to give them a lift. In terms of your own phone, put it somewhere where you can't hear it, see it, or reach it when you're driving. And that way you won't be distracted by it. The glove compartment is a great place. If you really do need to answer a call or make a phone call or check your phone for whatever reason, then you need to do it safely. You need to pull off into a safe and legal and convenient place. You need to, as we talked about last week, secure the car. So that means turning off the engine. It means putting the handbrake on. It means putting it into neutral. Only then is it legal for you to start using your phone. And remember how important you are. Don't let a text or something like that cause you to have a problem that could live with you for the rest of your life. The law is quite simple. Handheld phones, it's illegal to use them for any purposes, including as a sat nav. If you end up being caught doing this, then you will, so in the first 2 years of passing, you will lose your license. And as I said before, hands-free phone, it can be illegal to use those as well if the police believe it's distracting you from the most important job, which is control and safe driving. So the punishment, it's a £200 fine, but importantly 6 points on your license. Now that's going to make your insurance extremely expensive in the future, but as I just said, if it's within the first 2 years of after you've passed your test, that will be an immediate ban for you. You will have to go back and redo your driving test, both parts, theory and practical, and as I said, insurance is going to be extremely difficult. You may even end up in prison if, as a result of your actions, somebody is killed or hurt, and police will check phone records when investigating serious collisions. It could affect your chances of getting a job. because employers will ask about driving convictions, and they're going to look very poorly on somebody whose judgment is so flawed as to use a phone whilst driving. And guilt could live with you for the rest of your life. So this really is hopefully going to give you food for thought when you're tempted to use your phone. The next one, the cheater. Speed. It's a limit, not a target. Excessive speed contributes to 12% of all injury-causing accidents, 18% of crashes resulting in a serious injury, and 28% of all fatal crashes. And that means around 500 people a year are killed due to people driving too fast. And most deaths are going to occur on rural roads. These are narrow and bendy, where you don't really know what's going on as you come round the corner. And again, people take risks. They see a speed limit because quite often these are unrestricted. A good example would be the road up near Worley that leads from Mount Tabor. People are always shocked when I tell them there's a 60-mile-an-hour limit on that road because it's narrow, it's got the walls and it's very twisty, and yet that's the speed limit. And some people will see that as a reason to try and go that fast. But that's talking about faster roads. What about the 30-mile-an-hour limit? Now, as we know, Halifax is one of the areas that's gone with the 20 is plenty rule, and has made a lot of its roads 20 mile an hour. And the reason for that is really down to these statistics. If you hit people at 30 miles an hour, then 8 out of 10 are going to survive. But if you go up 5 miles an hour to 35, only half the people will survive. And if you hit somebody at 40, then almost everybody would die. When you drop it down to 20, most people will survive that impact. And that's one of the reasons why the 20 limit is being pushed for towns. So again, what can you do to be a good driver? Be the boss. Your car, your rules. Make sure your passengers know up front that you're not going to speed. And if they're in that much of a hurry, again, they can go and get a lift elsewhere. Very importantly, adapt. Make sure you understand the prevailing road and traffic conditions and maybe the weather conditions as well, and drive more steadily if that's appropriate. And understand that you're responsible for your vehicle. If you speed and something happens, you will have to live with the consequences. Although a lot of people don't like the idea of having a black box is often a good idea, as it will monitor your speed and encourage you not to speed, because if you do, then the insurance companies are going to increase your premiums, etc. But it can also bring your premium down in the first place quite significantly. And if you're planning to drive legally, then there should really be no reason for you to fear a black box. The law is quite simple. You mustn't drive faster than the speed limit for the road, and also not faster than the speed limit for the vehicle that you're driving. Be aware that although the speed limit for car, for example, if you look at a national speed limit, that's the white sign with the black band, the speed limit is 60 miles an hour for a car or a motorbike. But if you're towing, that speed limit is going to come down to 50. If you're driving a larger vehicle, it can come down even further. And this is also something you should appreciate when you come up behind these sorts of vehicles. So somebody towing a caravan or an HGV, they may not be doing 60. A, because it's not safe for them to do so, and B, because it's not legal. So remember that. Don't think they're driving along trying to hold you up, not doing the speed limit. They are doing the speed limit for the vehicle they're driving. As we know, speed cameras, they're posted all over the place to try and catch people speeding, and you also have mobile speed cameras where the police will sit in a van and they will do the same. You also have the motorway. If you look at the smart motorways, they have variable speed limits at times. So if you look at the stretch between Chainbar and Leeds, where they have the overhead gantries, sometimes those will display a change speed limit rather than the blanket 70 that is usually the limit. When those signs come up in red, that speed limit is being enforced by speed cameras. So speeding is one of the offences that technology is being used to catch. The punishment, well, you're going to get a £100 fine minimum, and you're going to get 3 points on your licence. 2 speeding fines, 2 speeding offences, and we're back to the within 2 years of driving passing your driving test, you will have to start all over again. If you're stopped by the police for speeding, they can either fine you or send the case to court. Some people will get these driver awareness courses as an alternative, but you will never be offered more than one of those. If you're caught on camera, it's the registered keeper who will get the notice, but they do have to say who the driver was. If they don't do so, they themselves have committed an offence. And again, if things get really serious, you could end up in prison. Again, the phone records are going to be checked. And again, we come back to, is it going to affect your future employment chances? And, are you going to have to live with the guilt of causing major problems to another human being? Showing off. So we have the peacock for showing off. And basically this is referring to the fact that if you're caught doing antisocial driving, you could have your car impounded, and it's going to be very hard for you to show off to your friends if you don't have a car. £150 fine, and it's up to the police to decide whether or not the driving that you've been demonstrating is within the legal limits that they can enforce. Some examples of things that can lead you to get into trouble could be creating a lot of noise. So, again, a lot of people have very, very powerful stereos. If you're using those late at night or in quiet areas, the police could take an interest in that. Road rage, intimidating other drivers, speeding or racing. These things all increase the risk of being involved in a collision as well. So again, don't get drawn into peer pressure. It's easier said than done if your friends want you to show off, but remember, you'll be putting yourself, your license, and their own safety at risk. Are you okay with that? Think about how you might react if your passengers start trying to show off. Be prepared to speak up. The statistics show that more girls are injured as passengers in these kinds of situations, and that tends to be because the boys will want to show off to them and the girls won't speak up. Be prepared to stop people from behaving badly. Remind your friends that if you want to be a good driver, and that you're going to look after them as well as yourself and other road users. And basically, if people are going to act and be stupid in your car, then tell them, your car, your rules. And again, we come back to the same thing again. They can get a lift elsewhere if they're not going to appreciate what you're trying to do for them. Showing off itself isn't against the law, but the offences that you commit by doing it are. And again, you're going to get picked up by the police if they see it, or if another driver reports that you're driving in a way that's just not appropriate. If you are given a warning, then that warning will be valid for 12 months, and if you're giving another warning, then your car can be seized, and again, you'll be without a car until you can stump up the money to get it back. This basically repeats the same information, so yeah, you will lose your car. And again, things like handbrake turns, donuts, that kind of driving, that's sort of should be reserved for the racetrack, not for the public highway. Now, drugs. Basically, we're talking here about the use of not just illegal drugs, but potentially prescription drugs as well. If they're prescription drugs, they will be there to try and help you with some kind of underlying condition, but they could have all kinds of other effects on you. Tiredness, drowsiness, or a change in your perceptions are common ones. And obviously, illegal drugs, they're going to get you on some kind of high or bring you down. And again, these are going to affect your reaction times or your perceptions, and just make you a very unsafe driver. So if you're on prescribed medicine, make sure that you're aware as to whether or not it's safe for you to drive. The leaflets that come with most Medicines will tell you that. If you're not sure, talk to your pharmacist or your doctor. To be a good driver, check yourself. If you're on medication but you think it's affecting your ability to drive, don't risk it. Speak to your doctor or pharmacist. Only drive if you're sure that you're in complete control of yourself and your vehicle. If you're not, find another way. Again, make sure your friends know that you're not into drugs and driving, and that if they're putting the pressure on for you to partake of something that they maybe have, then again, show them the door, get them to go elsewhere. And again, be prepared to speak up if you're a passenger. Don't allow yourself to become a victim. The law is very straightforward. You're breaking the law if you're unfit to drive because of illegal or illegal drugs, and the police are now able to conduct roadside tests to detect certain drugs, and if they believe there are drugs in your system, they can then take you for further tests of urine or blood, and if they're above the legal limits, you're going to fall foul of the law. The punishment, you're going to get at least a 1-year driving ban, unlimited fine, maybe time in prison, and a criminal record. And that's going to last in your license for 11 years. If you end up causing death by dangerous driving, you could be jailed for up to 14 years. So we're talking quite significant consequences of transgressing these rules. On a very similar vein, drink. Now the message here that we want to try and get across to you is that drink stays with you longer than you think. Okay, so like Churchill the dog would say, oh yes, you are still drunk. 1 in 5 deaths involve alcohol on the road, and again it's the younger end, especially young men, who are more likely to die in these situations. It has similar impacts on you to drugs. It's going to slow your brain function and reaction times. It can cause blurred, lost visions. It's going to increase your confidence levels, and it's going to potentially make you take risks. There is no safe way to know how much you could drink and be safe. Some people think, oh, I can hold my drink, oh, it's a half a pint or a pint and a half, whatever it might be, 2 glasses of wine. These are all hearsay. Each person is different. The only safe amount of alcohol that you can have in your system when you're driving is none. There are legal limits that you're allowed before the police would prosecute you, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're safe. And even if you're under the limit, if the police believe that you're driving in a way that's not safe, they can bring charges of reckless driving or careless driving or driving without due care and attention. Even, as I say, even if it turns out that you're under the limit, don't think that that's necessarily going to keep you away from the long arm of the law. So make sure that you are in control of yourself. Don't drink and drive. Just ask yourself, if you are involved in a collision, are you 100% confident you're in complete control? And if you think drinking could have an impact on that, that's a reason not to drink, not to drive. If you go out with a group regularly, then try and make sure you get a designated driver. Try and incentivize somebody to be a designated driver. Maybe you'll pay for their drinks. Maybe you'll give them petrol money. Maybe they'll be in control of the photos. Plan your nights out. If you can avoid driving completely, if alcohol's involved, that's great. What's the local transport options? And again, create a rule with your friends. Make sure that you're looking out for each other. Don't necessarily leave it all up to one person. Just agree amongst yourselves, because at some point, you're all going to be drivers and you're all going to have to take on this responsibility. Don't let others put themselves at risk. If you are going to have a drink and drive, then think about how long it's been since you last had your drink. Okay, as it says in the caption, it stays with you longer than you think. You've got to make sure that if you are driving after a drink, that it's a long time since you had your last drink. And also, if you've eaten, what effect that will have on how long the alcohol stays in your bloodstream. As I said, you cannot really think that it's safe to drive if you've had a drink. If you're not sure, don't risk it. And the hair of the dog, alcohol stays in your system for hours. So if you've had a really heavy night out, maybe a Christmas night out, something like that, the next morning you could still be over the limit. The police always mount Christmas campaigns to try and crack down on drink driving. Those campaigns are not just run in the evening; they run them early morning as well. So if people are driving to work on the morning after the night before, don't be surprised if the police pull you over. And if you're over the limit in the morning, it won't be any excuse that you haven't had a drink that morning. You are still over the limit. If you want to look at what the limits are, then have a look at that website address that you can see there on gov.uk. Remember that the drink drive limits in Scotland are actually different to the rest of the UK. They reduced theirs to 50 milligrams from 80. So if you are in the Scottish borders, you'll find that you're an even lower limit than you are here. The same if you go abroad. The continent tends to run the 50 milligrams limit, whereas the UK is, or say England and Wales and Northern Ireland are out of kilter with the rest of Europe. How long that will stay the case, I don't know. We've obviously at the moment got bigger fish to fry, but it could be there is pressure in the future for the UK to align itself with the rest of Europe. The punishment, well, almost certainly you're going to get a ban. The fine could be unlimited. Again, prison. Again, you could lose your job. If your job depends on your ability to drive and you're not able to drive, then that might be a reason for your employer to terminate your employment. And as with some of these other things, it could affect your chances of getting a job, or you could have to live with the guilt of hurting somebody else. Now, one of the biggest influences on young drivers' ability to drive is insurance. But not having insurance is a very stupid thing to do. Here we've got the donkey basically saying no insurance, don't be an ass. Usually when people have passed the driving tests, it's a great moment when the examiner tells them they've passed. But then, within a few days, possibly the realism of having to stump up that first insurance premium may start to weigh on you. And you may consider ways of keeping that price down. Be aware that not having insurance can have great consequences for you. If you're not insured, then you're going to be liable for the costs involved, and those costs could be huge. Remember, we've got people putting personal injury claims in as well as the cost of repairs. If you have got yourself insured, then if you're not at fault, don't worry, your no claims bonus should not be affected, and your future insurance premiums should stay in line with where they should have been if you're not at fault. There are all kinds of ways of trying to keep your premium down. We mentioned one earlier, getting yourself a black box. That's going to help. Always run some kind of comparison. The comparison sites are very good at comparing lots of companies quickly and giving you a good idea as to the sorts of price you could be paying. Try and amend the excess that you're prepared to pay. That can bring your premium down as well. How you describe your job may also, some job descriptions, if you play with those slightly, that can actually affect how the underwriters see you. And a big one that really can help your insurance premium if it's for your own car is adding your relatives who have good driving records as additional drivers. Even if they'll never drive the car, it will average your premium down. However, what you mustn't do is what we call fronting. Now, fronting is where the car is, well, maybe your car, or maybe it's not your car, but you're going to be the main driver as a young person. Instead of claiming yourself as the young driver, a parent usually or guardian will put themselves as the main driver and add you as an additional driver. Now, if that's the case, you should not be using the car for things like commuting, so travelling to and from work or school. You shouldn't be doing the majority of the miles in the car. That's basically what fronting is, saying that somebody is not the main driver when they really are. It is a kind of fraud, and it could result in your policy being cancelled. If that's the case, you're going to find insurance extremely expensive in the future, and it may land you in trouble with the police. You may end up getting 6 points on your license because effectively you're not insured. And also the parent could also have problems with their insurance for their own vehicle. And in the future you could find it very hard to get insurance, very expensive. So whilst it might be tempting because the price potentially is going to be much lower, it really isn't worth it. And you may find if you're involved in an accident that your insurance company won't pay out because they will say call you out for fronting. Distractions. So this is again about carrying passengers. So we want you to try and watch the road, not the chimps in the back. Again, getting a car, passing your driving test is one of those rites of passage for many young people, and it can be really good. I remember back when I was young, and you know we used to like being able to go out and drive around, and you know just having that freedom. But you get a lot of high spirits when you get young people together, and you, especially today, we've got even more distractions. Again, we come back to the mobile phones, and also social media and the amount of things that will go around on social media. I mean, again, at the moment, one of the things that's probably getting a lot of us through the days is these various little videos, TikToks, memes, etc. that are coming to us all via Facebook and WhatsApp and what have you, and give us a bit of a laugh. And you know, when you've got passengers in the car and suddenly something pings into their inbox, you know, they may want to try and show it to you, or they may want to play you some music or whatever it might be. You've got to make sure that you do not allow these things to distract you from your driving. So you've got to make sure you're in control of your car at all times. Younger and less experienced drivers, the risk of a collision goes up for every additional passenger you have in the car, and you're 5 times more likely to crash if you have 2 or more passengers in the car. And again, as we said earlier, statistically more girls die as passengers than as drivers. This is one of the reasons why there's been a lot of countries put what they call graduated licensing or probationary licensing once you pass your driving test. So although you have a full license, they don't allow you to, for example, travel at night or travel with more than one passenger, etc. The UK has debated this on and off many a times, and so far haven't done anything, but it is something that may well come back again in the future. And you find that, again, although you have your driving license, you can't just behave exactly as you want. And this is the reason why: distractions. So again, it's got to be your car, your rules. Make sure that your passengers, your friends, understand that you want to keep your license, keep them safe, keep yourself safe. Keep your music levels down. It will reduce the risk of distraction, and also it will allow you to hear what's going on around you. You know, when you're at a difficult to exit junction, being able to hear approaching traffic is important. If emergency vehicles are in the vicinity, if you can't hear them because you've got the music on too loud, again, you're going to be causing an unnecessary obstruction. In terms of the law, being distracted in itself is not against the law, but it's going to cause problems and you commit other offences, and the punishment is going to depend on what you actually end up doing. Hogging the road. So let's give time and space to people and pass wide and slow. Almost everybody walks, and most people at some time ride a bike, and yet around 45,000 cyclists and pedestrians are killed or injured on Britain's roads every year. And in almost all cases, the driver will be found to be at fault and will face the consequences. So don't hog the road. Only overtake pedestrians and cyclists and horse riders when you can do so safely. Slow down and give them plenty of room as you drive past. And remember, cyclists are legally entitled to cycle on the road even if there is a cycle path or shared path. Also, a lot of collisions will occur at junctions, so look out for cyclists and pedestrians. The most common cause, and this also includes motorcyclists, they have a little phrase that an accident will have been a SIDSI. Sorry, I didn't see you. Make sure that you do look. Give yourself time to look. We talked about this again a couple of weeks ago. When you're checking, when you're moving your head, give your eyes time to settle on whatever direction they're looking so that they can actually take in and assess the risks properly. I've also talked with people about the primary and the secondary position for cyclists. This is one of the things I like to try and get people to do research at the end of the first lesson, so that you understand early on how cyclists are taught to use the road and what their position is. Now, the secondary position is what we're used to seeing cyclists take up. It's where they ride near the curb, effectively out of the way of traffic. Now, what this does is it leaves more room for the car to pass. Cyclists are encouraged to take up the primary position, which would mean moving more towards the central position when there are hazards ahead. And the reason for this is it's to discourage drivers from taking risks in overtaking. It's basically saying, if you wouldn't overtake a car, you shouldn't be overtaking me. And it's protecting themselves and indirectly the driver as well, because if somebody does take a risk to go past somebody and it turns out to be a mistake because a car is coming the other way that they didn't anticipate or didn't see because of the bend or the obstruction, then that driver's at risk themselves as well of a collision. Unfortunately, what tends to happen is they'll tend to look after themselves, and it's the cyclist who comes off worst. So this is why a cyclist will take up that primary position, and drivers should appreciate this and not necessarily think that the cyclist is just getting in the way. They could be trying to anticipate trouble ahead. You also need to be aware of pedestrians. Pedestrians can be unpredictable, especially when they're on their mobile phones. Again, look out for people, see what they're doing. Have they got headphones in? Have they got their mobile phone? Are they more concerned with making a call or maybe looking at Facebook, walking along like a phone zombie? Try and anticipate what people are doing. If it looks like they might step out, assume that they will and slow down. Drive carefully. Be prepared to stop. Watch out for weather conditions as well. Cyclists, especially when it's windy, are more likely to swerve, or if the road surface is not good, they're going to move out of the way of obstructions in the road. So again, be nice and steady. Don't get too close. Give them lots of space when you know it's safe to overtake in a straight line usually. When you get to most traffic lights, you're going to find that there's a cycle box. You should be stopping at the first stop line, not in the cycle box. If you're only driving test and you stop in the cycle box, then you're committing an offence, and your examiner may even fail you for that if they feel as though there was no reasonable excuse for doing it. And just a few statistics there for the British Horse Society campaign, which really wants you to slow down and be quiet and go steadily past horses. The incidents involving horses are quite high, and as you see, we don't want to be killing these beautiful animals. Tiredness. Tiredness is also a killer. If you're dead tired, don't drive. A cat nap is all that you need to try and recharge your batteries. Again, young drivers are at risk for this because they don't recognise that it's a potential risk, and they'll just try and push on through, the same as they would maybe when they're at a nightclub doing an all-nighter. It's going to affect you in all kinds of ways. It's going to make your reaction slower. If you start to have what they call micro sleeps, where your eyes start to shut, then they can shut for a few seconds at a time, and if you're travelling at high speed on a motorway, then you could end up in a completely different place when you open them again to where you were when you started, and that can have absolutely devastating consequences. Big meals and alcohol can make you sleepy, and as we talked about earlier, so can some prescription drugs. So your young drivers are more than likely to be involved in these sorts of accidents, and by their own admission, young drivers admit to trying to drive when they're tired, compared to half that number in the rest of the population. If you have an accident when you're sleepy or tired, they tend to be more serious, because of the fact that they tend to result when maybe you've gone briefly unconscious and you really have no idea where the car's going. So to be a good driver, again, keep control of yourself and your vehicle always. Don't start a long journey if you're already tired. Plan enough time into a long journey so that you can grab a break now and then. If you're traveling with other people on a long journey, try and make sure you've all got the appropriate insurance so you can share the driving. If you're stopping for a coffee, remember it's only a temporary fix and you'll need at least 10 to 15 minutes for it to get into your system. Try and avoid trips late at night or early in the morning when your body clock probably wants you to go to sleep anyway, and get lots of sleep before a long journey. If you feel really sleepy, and this is what I find works for me, pull over and stop. I find that on a motorway journey, because it's very repetitive, very boring, and what you see, it can almost be quite hypnotic. There are quite a number of occasions when I will start to feel tired. What I will always do on those occasions is pull over, usually in a service area, to park up, and then shut my eyes for just 5-10 minutes and just let my body give in to the urge to have a very short sleep, and that usually is enough to recharge yourself and let yourself get going refreshed. Certainly is for me far better than opening the window or trying to have a drink of coffee. Again, no specific offences here, but you are likely to commit any number of offences if you let yourself to become so tired that you can't properly control your car. Seat belts. They can save your life and somebody else's. Now, I've not, as yet, I haven't come across a single one of my pupils who shows any reluctance to put a seatbelt on. So I think nowadays most people know that wearing a seatbelt is a sensible thing to do. And certainly when you're driving, it seems to be automatic. But post-test, whether people continue to do that, obviously I would be less aware. I would like to think they would. But passengers are what we're really focusing on here. It's really important that you make sure that your passengers are belted up. Now, you're legally responsible for passengers who are below a certain height or weight or age. Up to 14, you have to make sure that they're wearing their seat belts. Once they get beyond that age, they're legally responsible for themselves, but that's still not a reason for you to drive with somebody not wearing a seat belt. If you have a rear seat passenger not wearing a seatbelt and you're involved in an accident, then that driver will be thrown forward and will hit you with the force of a charging rhino. You effectively become the airbag for somebody sat in the back, and both you and they are going to be very seriously injured. Also, some people think that because they have an airbag, they don't need to wear a seatbelt. If you look at the name of an airbag, you'll see it's actually a secondary system. It's there as well as your seatbelt, not instead of. It's the law to wear a seatbelt. There are some very few exceptions, so few that they're not even worth going through. For example, it used to be that you could take your seatbelt off to reverse. That's no longer an exception. So you must make sure that you're wearing your seatbelts and that your passengers are as well, to keep yourself and them safe. Finally, the punishment: £500 if you don't wear a seatbelt when you're supposed to, £500 if your child under 14 isn't wearing a seatbelt and you're driving. So the material in this has been taken, as I said earlier, from a campaign called The Honest Truth. It's there to promote safer driving. If you want to see more, read more, maybe get hold of some of the resources, then the website address is thehonestTruth.co.uk. As I said, I hope you've found this useful, and hopefully some of this will stick with you and keep you safe as you carry on your driving career. I'm just going to wait a couple of seconds to see if there are any last questions. Okay, well, thank you very much for listening. I hope you found it useful, and look out for my next session, which will be next Thursday at 7 o'clock.